Take two. Sites in the U.S. that have these directed energy weapons. One is Nevada and the other is Maui. Let's start with this directed energy Air Force Maui optical and supercomputing AMOS site located on the island of Maui. May I quote from the website? Listen to this. Directed energy harnesses the power of the electromagnetic spectrum to enable airmen to effectively and affordably strike critical targets at the speed of light. Question: why Maui? Answer: it's a new grid in Hawaii dubbed the, quote, Jump Smart Maui Project.
We busted our and this is what we get? Nobody called us. Our phones didn't work from 5 in the morning. The fire was not 10 o'clock when I went to work. The fire was still there. There was no water. Tell me if that's coincidence. No water, no warning. And everybody talking about the satellite city before the fire. Lahaina going to be the first satellite city. Well, hey, Jeff Bezos, you got what you wanted. Oprah, you got what you wanted. And the guy who owns on that, you got what you wanted. That's all over. That's what happened. We need help in Lahaina. Who's going to come now and ask us, can I pray for you, Auntie? Thank you. Can I help you with your paperwork? Because all we got so far was $700 and we don't know who to call or anything. It's culturally insensitive in that zone.
Today, we're talking about the call from Congress to investigate President Biden and the government due to their poor response to the devastation in Maui. We'll also discuss the mystery surrounding the Maui Lahaina fire. We won't call these theories. Instead, we're going to call them mysteries or unanswered questions, since CNN certainly is not happy seeing good people trying to uncover the truth. One coincidence is that this is perhaps the largest land grab in U.S. history.
2 years ago, the average price of an American home was $215,000. Today, 2 years later, it's $400,000. The interest rates during that same period have gone from 1% to 7%. So that home is going to cost him 10 times what it would cost somebody 2 years ago. Most of us know people who were about to buy a home. They were ready to do it, and at the last moment, somebody comes in with a cash offer and scoops it out from under them. We've all heard those stories. Why is that happening? BlackRock. There's three companies: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Those three companies, which all own each other, so it's really one huge behemoth, also own 88% of the S&P 500. And now they have a new target, which is to gain ownership of all the single-family residences in this country. And they are on a trajectory to do that.
Is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. onto something here? Let's look. Who owns Maui? After the state of Hawaii, who owns 154,000 acres on Maui, Alexander and Baldwin is the second largest landowner at over 65,000 acres, and the U.S. government, they're the third largest landowner at over 33,000. Okay, so let's take a look at the investors who are behind Alexander and Baldwin. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Interesting. Those are the exact same three he just named.
I wanted to say that I was deeply moved by the president as he shared with us by phone about his experiences of loss. The president, within 6 hours, met our needs with the federal movement. 6 hours. I don't think that's ever happened before. So it's our deepest appreciation to you and Dr. Biden.
Governor Josh Green just said the president met his needs. Because what we've been seeing reported from the locals in Hawaii is that their needs certainly were never met. Now survivors in Maui have this to deal with.
We're experiencing now an issue with the water supply. We're being told that the water is not safe to drink. It's also not safe after boiling, which is quite frightening. And we don't know how long that these restrictions are going to be lasting on the public. We're also hearing that the potable water being brought in by government officials is making people ill for whatever reason. They're experiencing fevers, chills, and other ailments from drinking this potable water that's been left. So I really urge you guys to please be careful on ingesting this water and where you're getting it from.
Apparently over 1,000 body bags in massive containers and refrigerated trucks on the other side of the island right now. The government's trying to blame them. They didn't sound a siren. There was no helicopters that came for people. People had gone and picked their kids up from school and brought them home and left them home. No warning. No military came. The whole community is mourning these men, women, and children by not helping, by not sounding alarms. People were asleep in their homes with their babies and their children.
Sadly, it's also been reported that as Maui burned, Hawaii's top emergency management officials were at a Waikiki conference. Wow, what are the odds? And guess who was attending this conference? That's right, FEMA's top officials.
Those in attendance were quite literally the who's who of disaster response, both locally and from across the Pacific region. They were gathered in Waikiki for an annual FEMA disaster meeting, a half-hour plane ride away from a wildfire that would become the deadliest in the United States in more than a century. Thousands were unaware they were in the crosshairs of a deadly inferno. That evening, Lahaina town was leveled.
So many people that I know said we never knew anything about the fire.
That same day, several of the country's top emergency management officials were in Hawaii hosting an annual conference. The agenda listed 74 attendees at this year's Pacific Partnership meeting, including FEMA leadership and several.
Well, it goes on, and ever such. But Shaken Bob, well, same as it ever was, just a bunch of coincidences, just a happenstance of, carnage, the war in Ukraine, the war in Darfur, the war in Yemen, the war in all of Africa, the war that's about to happen in America. I mean, it's already going. This whole thing about bringing, all the Trumpettes to court. Virtually every frigging, president has been as corrupt as at least Donnie did it he was such a pinhead, he did it right in the open. He lied so much that he basically, all he had to do, it's like, when the government says anything, and this is straight out of George, Mr. 1984, right? And Orwell's Brave New World, whenever the state says anything, you just take the direct opposite. So when the state said, no child left behind, meaning they're going to leave every child left behind. And it's happening in my little neighborhood. There's a beautiful little red schoolhouse that, schools about 200 kids every year. And because the rich people coming in don't want to pay the taxes, they're going to close that school down and force all those kids to go into the county, which is about 40 miles away. So instead of getting up at 7 to go to school, they'll have to get up at 4, right? And instead of getting home at 4 p.m., they'll get home at 8. And that little red schoolhouse feeds those kids 3 times a day. Gives them a breakfast, gives them a lunch, and then gives them food to take home to their family. The church across the street does that. They're going to close that church down. That school down, which will close the church down. And I am trying to motivate the people in the church to take the school over, which this is Tennessee. They're gaga at, doing that, giving people vouchers. But, as I talked to some state officials, they said, between me and them, well, it's never going to happen in your school. If you were rich, they'd give you vouchers so you could have your own private school. But poor people, no. So what just happened in Hawaii, that's a coincidence. That's a mystery, directed energy weapons. Oh, what are those, They've had, 1970s when I was in, and we're Dick Powell Electric, and my little skill set was to build power sources, right? Power supplies. And, that was all I did, right? And I worked at Los Alamos, St. Louis Labs, Kirkland Air Force Base, and a whole bunch of dumps, right? Yep, getting rich over the underprivileged. Yep, pretty much that is America. Christopher Columbus came here and landed on El Salvador, which is or San Salvador, which is Haiti today. And it's very interesting. Haiti and Dominican Republic got one island, right? It's a line here. Very rich people here. Still very, very, very rich, and the golf courses. I mean, they can see things burning while they're playing golf. And I went there when I graduated high school. I went to high school, a Winchendon School for Boys, and it was the school for the richest people's kids, right? And we were all screw ups on, every single one of us got thrown out of some school for some reason. Mine was I was trying to free people, right? I was in a seminary called Canterbury in New Milford, Connecticut, where they had indentured servants. And when you were bad, when you didn't do what they said, you first had to be a waiter. Then you had to be a waiter's waiter. Then you had to work in the kitchen. And then you had to work out in the farm, right? And then you had to work on fixing things, painting this, doing that. Well, I constantly, because they had this thing called fagging, which upperclassmen could butthole any kid they wanted. All the priests were butthole. I mean, I knew Latin, so as a freshman, I had to get up at 6 to be there for mass, right? And that everyone showed up at 7. And the one of those priests was trying to butthole one of the kids right at mass over the corner, right? And I went over to him and said, hey, right in the middle of, and instead of me doing the stupid thing I was supposed to do, I went over and I was holding this gigantic big candelabra, that, what's his name, would be proud of. And I leaned on him and he went poof up into a thing of, a thing of smoke, right? And no one went and saved his butt. I mean, he started running around the church, with like 600 kids and teachers and priests, and they were just like yawning. And it was kind of entertaining. And basically, he went back up on the altar, and basically I threw him on the floor and wrapped him up in a blanket. And he really didn't get that torched. It was kind of interesting. But I stopped him from buttholing poor little Igo, who is like 4'2" and blinder than anything. His glasses were like that thick, but brilliant, right? And he didn't even know what was going on. So all these things are metaphor. They all represent kind of what's going on in the world on some fashion or another. Here's another good one.
Let me get around.
It's a guy named Darker.
Which is the other things that were supposed to happen in August that didn't. Very, very interesting. Continuity of government leader of Northcom, General Van Herk, was supposed to be switched out for General Gillett. And this was set up and went through the Senate in June and was supposed to happen. But there was a holdup by Richard Shelby, who is the Alabama senator. And somehow the whole COG apparatus that was coming in got stalled on August 20th. And it's been stalled since. So we're talking about 3 weeks. This is unusual activity. Oddly enough, there's before we jump in on all this, but we're going to find COG is directly related and unfortunately still very much in the game today, and seems to have only built its power in. But there's an interesting thing that came out, which is U.S. Northern Command Post, and it says, this is from August 23rd. Now, the switchover was supposed to happen on the 20th. General Glenn Van Herk, who, if you've watched this program, you're very familiar with, he's the Northcom NORAD commander who claimed he was shooting down UFOs back in February when we had the Chinese balloon incidents. General Van Herk, commander North American Aerospace Defense Command and U.S. Northern Command, the COG commander, welcomes nearly 30 National Guard, Army, and Air Force lieutenant colonels and above to the U.S. Northcom dual status command course. At the NORAD, U.S. Northcom headquarters, Peterson Space Force Base, Colorado, August 22nd, 2023, Van Herk discussed with the group how they would fit into U.S. Northcom chain of command if they were activated to fill the DSC role. That is, if COG was activated, when we had regional governors, they'd need all these groups to go out and secure different territories. The National Defense Authorization Act, signed in December 2011, facilitated the use of DSCs to provide unity of effort between state and federal forces in achieving common objectives in a disaster response or in supporting a national event. So, you have what it used to be with COG is you had a nuclear event and then COG got activated. This guy, the combatant commander of the United States, the NORTHCOM leader, which we got after 9/11. It's a completely unconstitutional process. This guy takes over and he appoints regional governors. So, the Eastern region gets these people and all the rest, and the military takes over, they secure the situation and, allow for another election. This is very interesting that this whole process got shaken up about him getting replaced. And then he's teaching now these DSC people what it's going to be like if they split the command and DSC does kind of a co-program with NORTHCOM on taking over. It's an odd thing, let's say, first of all, for Van Herk to still be there. He's supposed to be replaced by Gillett, as I mentioned, and then for him to be giving this briefing. Oddly enough, Van Herk also shot his mouth off about Space Command recently, and very unusually, he said that Space Command was deceptive, quote unquote. That's pretty heavy language for those guys. I mean, they handle ICBMs and stuff. Deceptive? That's kind of tricky.
Olive Eisner says, why did Van Herk get replaced? Do we know?
I think it's because Biden didn't want someone from the Trump administration being the NORTHCOM commander. But it's a fast replacement. And Van Herk's pretty young. I think he's 55 years old. Here's a little bit about Shelby holding it all up. And Shelby is a Republican from Alabama. For all we know, this is an interesting sign that something is going on in the background in the power struggle. And we can see a shot of Shelby there. But I'll read a little bit about this. U.S. military has a problem. Its cause is not a Chinese surveillance balloon. And this is a recent article, even though they're talking about that. It is the U.S. Congress, the 535 democratically elected representatives, with funding and approving policy for the nation's defense. Congress has embarrassed itself multiple times during the last 2 decades by failing to approve annual deficit spending and defense spending for the new fiscal year, forcing the Pentagon to rely on stopgap funding. Now, a freshman senator from Alabama is setting a dangerous precedent in this process. Senator Tommy Tuberville, a Republican, has put a procedural hold on the nomination of more than 300 military officers, Navy and Marine Corps, with no confirmed chief. The former football coach at Auburn University is taking issues, and he's creating a false reason. Now, I'm not so sure that this is a bad thing. And so, but it is true that Tuberville is taking the lead on it. Shelby, there is a piece of this that's associated with Shelby. Aviation Week is not in the business of weighing in on social issues, and we are not about to start to. We cannot ignore that Tuberville is holding and inflicting U.S. military apparatus after 5 months. And so on it goes. Now, this is not to emphasize the impact of Tuberville's hold. The Pentagon will find a way to function, and so on and so forth. But they are holding up that entire COG switchover, and in the process, they're holding up everything else, including all these appointments that our friend Biden has made. Now, the Biden administration, they may realize that the Biden administration is in such a legal trouble from the Hunter scandals and for other things that are arising, including his obvious mental problems, shall we say. So what they may be doing is looking at a situation here where they know the leadership is going to be switched out. So therefore, they don't want to activate what he put in because it only gives more power to this thing that's going down. And I think that's what is behind Tuberville on this. Watch that situation closely because the COG commander is in the crucial role here, especially with all the.
So this is why I like Dark Journalist. I would say go to his channel. That's one of my streams that I look at pretty religiously. And so this is not something new, you know. Back, like I said, Christopher Columbus, lands on Haiti, and they called it Hispaniola. And there were 6 million indigenous people on that island, right? And they had a very well or sophisticated social structure, right? And he, within 10 years, kills all those people. And he has totally decimated the land because he is going to go there and make a lot of money by growing sugar, and growing cotton and the new tobacco plant. He's doing everything for and Haiti's there in the Caribbean, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump to Spain. So this is what the backbone of what Spain's empire was built on. This kind of oppression. And we got black slaves from Africa because he killed all the indigenous folk. So Africa was just right over there. So he went over there, just grabbed a whole bunch of people. And it wasn't like the African people were getting other African people and selling them to this, guy from Spain. No. And, for us, when we have governors in Florida and Texas who want to rewrite history because they don't like the woke, that whole woke thing is a joke. Black Lives Matter is a joke because these are entities that are put together to have the loyal opposition. I mean, really real. I am an African American that's melanin challenged. I've lived in these kind of communities my whole life, and I was brought up to be a super wealthy dude. I went to the best schools. I was, going to be a rocket scientist for the Pope. My godfather was Cardinal Cushing. I was connected. Then I started doing, my passion is electricity since I was an infant. My grandma grabbed me, so I grew up not with the psychodramas of my family, but the unconditional love of my grandma, and that her best friend was a black woman who just had a baby, so I was on the other breast, So I got, that's why I'm African American. That's melanin challenged, and I grew up in Harlem and in Freeport, Long Island, and then my parents moved to Oldfield, which is super rich people, and then I went to these super elite prep schools. One to be a priest, and then because and I only got in there because my godfather was a cardinal. He said he's going to school here, right? I was doing that, and in the middle of I just rebelled. I was a sweet little. Oh, I didn't bring the photo with me. I'm just a sweet little kid. I didn't think of any of this kind of stuff, but it was in me. I've had amazing mentors my whole life, and every single one of them said, Al, the real interesting thing about you is you can't lie. You always tell the truth, and you speak truth to power. There was no really any more powerful person in the United States at the time than my godfather, Cardinal Cushing. Right? I rebelled too. Yep. And as all of the great African American leaders talked about, that you should get into good trouble, meaning don't just be pushed over. So we're right here, all of the little coincidences that have been happening, since Y2K, and it's constant pressure on the population to freak out, right? To like, oh yeah, Y2K, oh the world's going to end, no more electricity. Well, that's going to happen, And Elon Musk has put himself into a position where he is going to own. He's going to be the demigod, but just the poster child demigod. Meaning he's not in charge. None of those, micro penis Billy Boy and loser Larry. What's his name? And all those people named Larry. Anybody who has a Y at the end of their name, Jimmy Carter. I met Jimmy Carter a couple of times, and me and a bunch of people, we started a ORE, Outstanding Renewal Enterprise. We took over 50 buildings in Manhattan, in Queens, and Brooklyn, and Bed-Stuy. in the South Bronx, and we put 500 families in them. And I, being a master electrician, I got legal electricity into every electric bill, which is the platinum standard of residency. So, in America, we have the right, and we have experienced the right to be your own person, right? Even if you're a slave, you can be your own person. But as our lives are being digitized, and that means the authority over you is no longer human, not even transhuman. If you look like a JoJo, the used car salesman, he's a transhuman. He's not a human being anymore. Just look at his face. When he was, he's in India. Video of him. Let's see if I can bring it up because it is just strikingly freaking amazing. Let's see. Here we go.
Including former President Trump.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The list goes on and on.
Welcome to the News Hour. A newly released report reveals a special grand jury in Georgia recommended charges for twice as many people than the 19 ultimately indicted for efforts to overturn the 2020 election.
Those 19, including former President Donald Trump, all pleaded not guilty earlier this week. But the Fulton County District Attorney has not brought charges against the 21 others named in this report, including 3 U.S. senators and a former senior White House official. Here to unpack the unsealed report and what it may reveal about the case is Chris Timmons, a former county prosecutor in Georgia and law professor at Georgia State University. Chris Timmons, welcome and thanks for joining us. Before we get into this special grand jury report, I want to ask you about some news we just received late this evening. A judge has ruled against the former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' request to move his case from Georgia to a federal court. Tell us your reaction to that. Is that what we expected?
That's exactly what I expected on that. I think when you look at the case as far as the removal issue, what's important there is whether Mr. Meadows was acting under color of his office. In other words,
No, this is all scripted. This is all a soap opera. This is all a distraction from what our journalist is talking about, COG and what went on in Maui. I mean, now they're saying, oh, you can't drink your water. Oh, you can't, and the land grab, all of that property was just taken away. It was being taken away from the people who owned it while they were dying in the fire. And those 1,000 bodies, they're never going to find them. They were incinerated to dust. And they're saying, oh, the water's deadly and the ground is deadly. You can't go home because it would show. Meaning, if you got a little test tube full of the dust that is left of Lahaina, you could then do a spectrograph and see how molecularly down on the atomic level everything had changed. And the only way that can be done is with a direct energy weapon, right? And that's just a circumstance. It's a mystery. It's one of those mysteries, right? Mysteries of science that you can really, and that's why, within a month and a half, every bit of evidence of what happened to the World Trade Center was gone. They were taking it out of there that night. They had built the ramp down into the basement, and they had, dumpsters, trucks, and taking it all over to the East River where they were dumping it on barges, and it was taken to India and China. And I mean, these are just circumstances. These are just coincidences. These are just mysteries, And they're nothing, just a mystery,
acting under color of his office? In other words, was Mark Meadows acting as the chief of staff to the President of the United States, or was he acting as a part of the campaign? The judge did.
Inundated with at least 10 people killed and 2,500 rescued so far. Even today, there were new evacuations and flood victims faced a new reality.
Tragic disaster, misery, pain, sorrow, such a tragedy will suffer for a very long time. The damage to our homes is irreparable. A lifetime's worth of work was lost within 2 hours. It's completely destroyed.
Meantime, record rain in Hong Kong caused by a typhoon is blamed for 2 deaths, with hundreds of people forced to flee. Officials say a quarter of the city's average annual rainfall fell in a single hour, triggering severe flooding and landslides. Hurricane Lee has weakened slightly tonight after briefly becoming this year's first Category 5 storm in the Atlantic. It's still swirling over open waters off the northern Leeward Islands, on track to pass north of the Caribbean region this weekend. The storm's path after the middle of next week remains unclear. In Ukraine, Russian missiles rained down on multiple cities again overnight. Player Jenny Hermoso on the lips without her consent after the national team won the World Cup. The incident has sparked protests across Spain, and Rubiales has been suspended. He could get up to 4 years.
Will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City.
Mayor Eric Adams has promised a humane response while stressing resources are overwhelmed.
The real issue that we are seeing is not a resource issue. It is actually making
described it potentially as a earth-shaking corridor, but again, those talks are still developing and they haven't come to a deal just quite yet. Beyond that, Amna, the prospect of real big developments out of this summit are slim, and because of the fact that India does not want to
Okay, so those are just mysteries, coincidences. Just one PBS NewsHour thing. I mean, I couldn't find an imagery of. So he was coming off the airplane, and Modi was greeting him, and Modi looked like Mickey Mouse, and Biden looked like Goofy, right? Disney characters. And so, you know, it's just a coincidence. It's just a mystery, you know? So what happened to respect? And what is respect? Respect is you respecting yourself. We cannot have respect on this planet unless you respect yourself, unless you step up, unless you ask questions, unless you do something about your life. If you expect someone to take care of you, not going to happen. Candace, come back. And remember, all of you, get a hold of me at my email, thedudewait42@gmail. Thedudewait42@gmail. Anybody want to throw something on PayPal? I could truly use it. All the rich people, you know, who don't have houses in my defunct gated community don't want to pay for it, right? But they want to have access to water, right? And so the 7 of us who do are going to have to pay $27,000. And my share of $27,000 is quick, 7 into 27. Let's just say $3,000 just to make it easy. Or let's say 4 to round it off, right? Well, I don't have that. You know, I live on $400. And the one guy said, well, you're not rich enough to live here. You shouldn't be here. And the other guy said, hey, easy on Al. He's been here longer than any of us all put together because all the other guys have just bought these places since COVID. So, you know, they've been here 2 years, give or take. And 3 of them are already bailed because they can't stand being out there in the middle of the woods with just beauty and love and God, right? And so, talk about God. So, like I said, around Thursday or Friday, we had a big thunderstorm right around 2 or 3 o'clock, right? And so I was puttering around and I heard, you know, I was out in the ground trying to figure out what I could do to have water, at least to flush my toilet, because it hadn't rained in a few weeks. Anyway, so I basically said, I shouldn't be out here in the ground playing with electricity. So I went up on my deck, and I was under, and half my deck is covered by a outcropping roof. And so I'm sitting there in my wheelchair, because when I died in 2014, they wanted to cut my legs off, and so my legs didn't work for about 6-8 months. So I was rolling around in a wheelchair, and so anyway, I'm sitting in my wheelchair. The flash that it like made me blind and then crash. I mean, it was the crash and the light was at the same time. So it's like right nearby. Good thing I got out of the woods, right? And well, at least in the ground. And so anyway, it rained so hard I couldn't see 10 feet to where the railing of my deck was. So, well, that's pretty good. And it was raining. So my little, I gather, I have a cistern. So that filled, I have a 200-gallon cistern. It was almost bone dry, and it filled up in less than 10 minutes, right? And it was like shooting. I have a little hole at the top of it as a release valve, and the water was like shooting out like a little kid taking a piss. And so I filled up on my ice chests and about 10 jugs, 1-gallon jugs. So I, within 15 minutes, I had enough water to last me till Thanksgiving. And all I had to do is turn 2 little valves, and my toilet gets the water from my cistern rather than my well. And so the well was not working. So anyway, and that was the day I found out it wasn't working, and no one came and talked to me except for this one crazy guy down at the bottom, and that was the next day. And so I went and looked at it, and we played with everything, and everything looked to me like it was fine, and that there was a $12 circuit breaker that didn't work, right? And so I said, and I called up everyone, and the really rich guy was going, "No, we're going to take care of it right away. I'm a businessman. I take care. I don't fool around. I don't, So he got somebody $26,000, right? I said, just let me take a look a little further. Then, it was getting dark, and I can figure out why this thing isn't working, and I'm sure I could fix it for less than that. So anyway, the next day I went into town, did a bunch of errands, bought the circuit breaker for $12, came back, and when I came back, the guys the guys were there, and they were driving away, and said, "Well, we can't get in. Our crane doesn't fit." And I said, "So did you change the breaker?" "Oh no, everything has to be replaced." Right. And so I kind of, they got out of their ways, and they left, and I went down to look at it, and this is what I found. They had torn everything apart, right? The starter. They tore the starter apart. They took it. They took the relays and the condenser and everything out and threw it underground. So there was no fixing this. And so 2 days later, they got some guys from Charlotte. They didn't even do it themselves. They got subcontract, and luckily they did get those guys because those guys knew what they were doing. They replaced everything in less than 6 hours. They had all the right tools. They had all the equipment. They had everything. And so yeah, I'm watered down, but at a price of $26,000. But basically, if we were hoodwinked, we were taken advantage of, because I bet you dollars to donuts, if they hadn't destroyed this, and I could have put that breaker in, it would have worked. But no, I'll never know. Anyway, so that's a lack of respect, meaning the rich people who think money is the way to go had no respect for Al's experience, and that was that, right? So, Ooh, let's give Larry a call. Let's see. There you go. Of course, listen to this.
Your phone has been deactivated. If this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911.
Anyway, same as it ever was. What can I say? All I can say is, you have a good day, and I'll get back to you sooner or later. Remember, hey, throw some money in that PayPal. I owe $5 to have my water. It kept on, and my phone needs some money to turn my phone on. So, you know, that's always fun. Right? I love you.